من أن هذا المشروع لم يكتمل، إلا أنه يظل شامخا كدليل واضح على عبقرية حسن فتحي المعمارية وأسلوبه الذي شكل نظرية معمارية أطلق عليها العمارة البيئية أو عمارة الفقراء.
Welcome to this episode of our program Arab Affairs, and as usual we will be discussing an Arab file. One of the most important Arab files nowadays is the Libyan one. The Libyan one that has been seeing lots of developments during the past few years, and in a time has become a failure state. Moving on towards stability, this is what the Arab needs at this very particular time. Egypt has already called on all Libyan parties, national forces and social components of the country to end the escalation and start a dialogue. This is what the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, or the spokesman of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Ahmed Hafez, said, emphasizing the urgent need to protect civilians and achieve calm to preserve the safety and security of Libya and the Libyan people. This is what we will be discussing in our episode today. Before we start with the Arab news, let me here take this piece of news. In Egypt will be hosting for 2 days the 9th annual conference for the Arab Parliament's Secretariat or General Secretariats. The Egyptian Parliament will be hosting the 9th annual summit this September on the 4th and 5th, where the conference is to see or to witness intensive discussions among the parliamentarians on exchanging views and experience on means of supporting the efforts to for the Arab parliaments to conduct their missions or their legislative missions that will be taking part on the 4th and the 5th of September. And we move on to the Arab news that took place this week, and here is a complete news to the news.
President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi on Monday held a phone call with his Iraqi counterpart Barham Saleh. Presidential spokesperson Bassem Radi said that President Sisi retreated during the phone call Egypt's full support to Iraq. The head of state stressed the importance of abiding by the dialogue track and putting Iraq's national interest on top of all other considerations, saying that Egypt, along with other Arab countries, is ready to exert utmost effort to end the escalation in the Arab Asian country. For his part, Iraqi presidential expressed his appreciation for Egypt's historical and continuous support for Iraq. Also on Monday, President Sisi held a phone call with Iraqi Prime Minister Mustafa al-Khadimi, where the two leaders discussed the latest development in Iraq. They also discussed the efforts exerted in order to retrieve peace and stability in Iraq. The United Nations Security Council called on the Iraqi parties to exercise restraint and to start dialogue. Clashes erupted on Thursday between Muqtada Sadr supporters and militants linked to Hasht Party in Basra, southern Iraq, leaving 4 people killed. Security forces deployed en masse to quell the fighting, and Basra's governor said the situation in the city became under control. 2 Palestinians were killed in separate clashes with the Israeli occupation military in the occupied West Bank. The Palestinian Health Ministry said that the 25 26-year-old man from a refugee camp in Nablus was shot in the neck, and a 26-year-old man from another camp near Jerusalem was shot in the heart. The Israeli occupation military has been conducting near-daily raids in the West Bank since the start of the year, and these often lead to Palestinian casualties. The Syrian Sana news agency said that several strikes by the Israeli occupation forces hit Aleppo airport in northern Syria, also reporting material damage. It said 4 missiles had targeted the runway and depots at the airport believed to contain missiles supplied by Iran. Sana also said that Syrian anti-craft defenses had intercepted what it described as enemy missiles above the capital, Damascus. The International Monetary Fund told the Lebanese state its banking secrecy law has not resolved key deficiencies, urging officials to make new changes to their first attempt at financial reform. The assessment in the IMF's first comment on Lebanon's step toward completing a checklist that would grant it access to $3 billion to ease the country's worst economic meltdown since the 1975-1990 civil war. The amended banking secrecy law passed in July was a watered-down version of the original proposal, promoting concerns the IMF would not consider it robust enough to qualify. Lebanon's President Michel Aoun has declined to sign it into law and sent it back to Parliament for further changes. On Thursday, Lebanese officials received a letter from the IMF saying the law represented a substantial reform, but few key deficiencies remain.
Be the first to know. The news live at the site of the event. Information on events as they are happening. If it's breaking news, TV.
وانت ماشي في الطريق أو قاعد مع صديق وانت بره مصر أو جوه مصر وانت في الشغل أو في المكتب جوه البيت أو بره البيت. ماسبيرو.EG معاك في كل مكان. بوابة ماسبيرو، إعلام مصر بين إيديك.
Right, welcome back. And I said at the very beginning we'd be speaking about Libya and the developments in Libya today in our in our episode. Before we move on into our discussion, let's first have a quick look on the situation in Libya and Egypt's call for the Libyan sides to end the escalation, the situation on the ground in Libya and how things are ongoing there. Let's watch.
Egypt called on all parties and powers in Libya to stop escalation, avoid violence, and resort to dialogue to avoid bloodshed. Foreign Ministry's spokesperson Ahmed Hafez stressed the importance of protecting civilians and reaching a truce to maintain Libya's stability and security. Egypt hopes that all Libyan factions would reach consensus to achieve the Libyan people's aspiration for stability and better future. Meanwhile, the Arab Parliament has expressed concern over latest developments in Tripoli, which witnessed armed confrontations that led to several deaths and injuries among civilians. In a statement, it called on all Libyan parties, national forces and social components to end violence and escalation and exercise self-restraint in order to end bloodshed, return to dialogue, and preserve the capabilities of the Libyan people. The Arab Parliament stressed the need to reach a Libyan solution that would achieve stability in Libya, expressing its full solidarity with the Libyan state, offering its condolences to the families of the victims, and wishing a speedy recovery for the injured.
Right, welcome back. And to highlight the situation in Libya, we have with us over the phone Dr. Raouf Ghaffar, political analyst. Good afternoon to you, sir. Hello.
Hello.
Yes, Dr. Ghaffar, good afternoon to you, sir.
Good afternoon to you.
Thank you so much. We're speaking here today about the situation in Libya, the developments occurring there after long times of chaotic scene. How do you read the scene in Libya?
Most sad and most unfortunate. I mean, we are experiencing a stalemate for long months now. The different factions do not seem to agree on anything. On the contrary, they are escalating the situation. Everybody wants to stay in power, and he doesn't want to proceed as agreed years ago. So you have the National Accord government from one side. The Prime Minister doesn't want to quit. On the other side, the appointed cabinet by the Parliament cannot enter Tripoli. The supporters of each of the two sides are fighting each other in Tripoli. So far, the army is standing on taking a neutral position, but I don't know for how long. There is no sign of any elections in the foreseeable future. So, I mean, it's a big dilemma, and unfortunately, the situation is not very promising, as I say, and although things started to look better maybe last month when they reopened the oil fields and they started pumping oil again, one doesn't know if this will continue or it will stop. People are saying that the income of oil is not evenly distributed between all Libyans. The south is sore. I mean, one can talk hours about the chaotic situation in Libya, but hopefully we always are hopeful that they might come to their senses and sort of forget their own benefit and look at the general picture and the stability and security of the country in general. Because, as we all know, Libya, when it is unstable, this reflects on the neighboring countries, and it creates more and more complicated situation, if I may say. And let us hope that things get better.
Of course, we all hope for things to get better, because this brotherly country has seen lots and lots of suffering. The people there are suffering very much indeed. That is from one side, and because we need for Libya to stabilize and regain its role. If we speak about the fighting that are occurring on the spot right now, and those come right after mounting tensions between backers of Abdelhamid Dbeiba, the former Prime Minister, and Fathi Bashagha, and the backers of this side and the backers of the other. Dbeiba doesn't want to quit power, and he says that it should come by election. What election are we speaking about? Bashagha, on the other side, wants to hold or form a cabinet to be able to reach this transformation or transition into real elections, which would lead Libya to the safe haven. From your point of view, who are or why is the scene has amounted to that extent from one side? And how do you view the role played by the UN mission in Libya?
I'm sorry to say that although the UN is trying and making some efforts, I should say, to try and resolve the situation, apparently nobody is listening. I mean, the envoy of the Secretary General, she keeps calling for peace, calling for the factions to sit together, work something out, etc., etc. And reports after reports and messages after messages come from the Security Council and from the UN in general and Secretary General. But as you rightly said, nobody listens. Everybody wants to stick to his position. They want to keep, I should say, power in their hands. And from one side, Dbeiba thinks that he is the legitimate cabinet leader, legitimate prime minister and leader of Libya. And on the other side, on the east, the parliament has selected, or elected, I should say, a government headed by the former Minister of Interior, and who tried to get into Tripoli, but he could not. And then I'm sorry to say, but his militias are fighting with the people, the supporters of Dbeiba from the other side, and they don't seem to reach any compromise. You were talking a little bit earlier about elections. I hope there will be an election. We know that the elections was foreseen for last December, scheduled for last December, but never happened. I really don't understand. The only maybe beacon of light, I should say, is that we do not feel the existence of foreign militias and foreign military existence on the soil of Libya. Maybe they are keeping a little bit on the low side, but this is maybe the only optimistic view about the whole situation. I hope, of course, everybody is calling for foreign forces to be evacuated and leave Libya But apparently the people on the West, they don't want that anyway.
Dr. Ghaffar, Libya has been in a chaotic scene since 2011, and it's more than a decade now. It's almost 11 years in that situation. And this time, escalation comes between two very powerful sides. One who has the backing of course, his or big tribes in Libya. The other, the same. But this time we're speaking about someone who is backed by the UN, or the UN has backed him from one side, while the other was appointed by the Libyan people. We're speaking here about the Libyan parliament. And we're speaking all of them supposed to be taking the helm until the end of this transitional period that would take Libya to safe haven, meaning elections, according to the Sukhayrat, according to the Geneva 1 and 2 and others, according to the meetings that occurred here in Egypt and hosted by Egypt, according to all those meetings that have been taking place just for Libya. So far, so far there has been a weapon embargo on Libya, but we are seeing lots and lots of weapons inside Libya. Now, what or who are the those who are contributing to fueling the situation in Libya to this extent?
I think that it's a game of power between the Libyans themselves. In my opinion, I think that everybody, I mean the external world, want to have a stable Libya. We know Libya has a lot of resources, particularly oil, and this is what we do not understand. I mean, if the wealth of Libya is really distributed evenly and justly over the Libyan population, everybody will be happy. And it's not a matter of holding the power in your hand, but it is a matter of keeping your country safe. This way, I cannot see safety coming and security coming. Again, we keep mentioning elections. It doesn't seem to happen. I cannot personally see it coming in the near future, unless you can see something else. Nobody wants to give in. They don't want to sit even together to work something out. You mentioned a lot of agreements in Cairo, in Sukhayrat, in Geneva, and elsewhere. They agree, and then immediately after they disagree, and they reach a formula by which they can work together, and then they completely ignore and go back on what they agreed. So I really don't know, and nobody, of course, is interested with all the conflicts that are happening all over the world. Nobody is interested to come in and sort of enforce a solution. They are simply leaving the Libyans to decide, and they don't seem to agree on anything. I don't know. The army, again, as I said, is taking a sort of neutral position, and they don't want to interfere. They have a point, of course, but as I said, from one side the parliament is there, and from the other this government that was appointed by the international community. Was it a mistake to have this government? I cannot say today that this was a mistake, but at least it was a step towards a final solution of the situation. It did not work, and we are very sad. I am very sad to speak about our brothers and sisters in Libya, and I think the whole world is suffering one way or the other from the situation in Libya, particularly the Libyans themselves. And again, as you said, and as I said, we pray and hope that a miracle happens and the Libyans agree on anything to take a step in the right direction.
Dr. Ghaffar, Libya, Iraq, Syria, but particularly we're speaking here about Libya, but also the same case is Iraq, but Iraq since longer, even longer, has not been able to stabilize in a way that would really get it back to its very strong position in the Arab world and in the Arab Commonwealth. Those are two very important countries in terms of oil, in terms of energy, in terms of economy, and they should have been of the very strongest economies in the Middle East. How do you view the interference of the or the foreign interference and the influence on of that on both countries, or on the developments in both countries?
Mind you, one can understand the situation in Iraq. It's a partly religious, partly ethnic situation between the Shiites from one side, the Sunnis from the other, on the north by the Kurds. I mean, one can understand that each of these three forces want to have their own independence, I should say, territory. Maybe one is backed by the Iran, the other is, etc., etc. I can understand that it is difficult given the distribution of the population between the three sects. But if we are talking maybe close to that, the situation in Syria. But we're talking Libya, there is no ethnicity there. Maybe tribes, but I mean they all agreed, and they have no differences as far as religion, sects, or ethnicity is concerned. That is why the situation in Libya, to me at least, and to a lot of people, is really puzzling, because they don't have this. And we remember when some foreign entities wanted to interfere, so-called being called in by some of the factions, but once again, it did not work. Terrorism in Libya, or fanatism even in Libya, is fading down. Now we do not hear about Daesh or whatever fanatic movement in Libya, or at least they are not the reason for the steering the matters in Libya today, but it is among the Libyans themselves, and this is what makes it more pathetic and really sad, because they are fighting between themselves, Libyan against Libyan, with no foreign interference, with no ethnicity and whatever. So again, we hope that the situation is solved here and there. As you rightly said, it is most unfortunate because these two countries are, they have a very promising, I should say, future. They have resources, unlimited resources, as far as oil particularly is concerned, enabling both countries to be one of the strongest economy, not only in the area, but all over the world. And this is what makes the situation even sadder and more pathetic. So, again, in my humble opinion, the situation in Libya is much easier to solve than the situation in Iraq. And again, I'm not a politician, but I can see it that maybe in Iraq they will continue to have problems until they agree on something. But in Libya, they have no reason, except that people in power want to keep their power and not to give in for no understandable reason, unfortunately.
Indeed, the fight in Libya is pitting Libyan parties, and this is the very unfortunate issue that is really breaking the hearts of the Libyans and the whole Arab world, seeing Libyans fighting each other. But also we are seeing mercenaries, and we are seeing the backing of some outside contributors. From your point of view, how do you view the role that should be played by the United Nations and the international community towards Libya at this upcoming stage?
Again, this is a very personal opinion. I think that the effort of the United Nations should be focused on removing all the foreign forces from the Libyan territory. Ask them to go back to their countries, and if there are mercenaries, again, to find somewhere else to go and leave. Maybe if the Libyans sit together without having mercenaries and foreign interference among them, I am positive that the possibility of reaching an agreement would be much higher. But foreign existence on any soil makes the problem more and more difficult, and the solution becomes more and more complex. So I think that the United Nations today have to concentrate their effort on evacuating all the foreign, whether fighters or countries even, out of Libya. And then I think the mission would be much easier to have the Libyans sit together and reach a satisfactory agreement that is for the benefit of Libya and the security and stability of Libya. So I think this is what can happen. Or else I cannot see how the United Nations can force the Libyans to go into elections or to move one step ahead with the existence, as you said, of militias and foreign forces on the Libyan territory. So I hope they succeed in convincing them to leave, and then I'm sure the situation can be easily tackled.
Yes, indeed. We all hope for Libya to regain its stability and security at this very upcoming stage, or the very near and possible as soon as possible, as they say, because we really need a stable Libya at this upcoming stage.
100%.
Dr. Raouf Ghaffar, political analyst, we thank you so much for being with us over the phone.
Thank
and
you.
I guess with that we come to the end of this episode. Next Saturday would be another important Arab file. Until then, it's goodbye.